He stood suddenly, leaving me crouched and trembling, clenching and unclenching my fists, unpleasantly aware of how thin my gloves were now. I stood slowly. My headlamp slid up the trees in front of me, where the bark seemed to shiver and shift with the traffic of smaller spiders oozing up and down the trunks. I turned my head to see where Robert Jr. was looking, and my light fell on his back several meters away as he moved down the left path in the fork. "Wait," I squeaked, rushing after him. I stumbled over tree roots and ran haltingly, skidding awkwardly to step around more than one fat, lumbering tarantula as I made my way back to Robert Jr.'s elbow. Our headlamps bobbed in the darkness, and my gaze was drawn farther up where the lamp's beams lit up vast labyrinthian webs high overhead, where nothing on the ground could destroy them. Glinting white gold in our light, they shuddered in an imperceptible breeze. "Those webs are way better high up there," I said with a breathless chuckle, trying to shake off the anxiety from the Brazilian wandering spider. "We won't walk into any down here." Robert Jr. walked briskly, barely acknowledging me with a grunt. While I looked all around me, casting my headlamp's light to and fro, Robert Jr. hardly moved his head, focused steadily on the twisting path down which he led us. Occasionally he would stop so abruptly that I would collide with his back, and he would gaze up into the ever-thickening treetops at the spider webs overhead, which were now so large and thick that massive sections of leaves had suffocated and died. I could see clusters of spiders creeping every which way in the stuff, while more obscured movement shifted on the other side of the web, so thick that I couldn't see what it was. My depth perception was off in this environment. What with the distance between myself and the webs, and the number of different sizes of spiders I could see, everything looked bigger up there from where I was standing. "Communal webs," said Robert Jr., pointing at the massive net of silk. "Most spiders live alone, but some are social. Bunch of different spiders taking care of the same babies, sharing the same food. They must catch a lot of prey," I said, moving my headlamp over the vast web. "It's huge. Wouldn't be surprised if they make a regular meal of birds," Robert Jr. speculated. "Squirrels too, maybe, if any wander in this far." I looked at him, bathing his stubble-shadowed face in yellow light, and said slowly, That's kind of big for a spider, isn't it?" "P. blondie in South America has been known to eat birds," said Robert Jr. "It's the biggest spider in the world, at least outside of this godforsaken forest. This place ain't like the rest of the world." He paused, a muscle jumping in his jaw, then said, "But they don't make webs, they live in burrows. So watch your step." I resisted the urge to clamp onto his arm like a child as I swept my handlamp over the edges of our path. Spiders littered the forest floor, scurrying busily, but the irregularly spaced holes along the path and nestled between tree roots were what made me nervous now. The biggest hole looked like it could swallow my leg. We continued to walk, uninterrupted by webs for the most part, but there were a few low-built ones that I would walk into when I was staring off into the woods and Robert Jr. wouldn't tell me to duck. Unnerved as I was, I was starting to get used to the sensation, hardly jerking back when the sticky, feather light string snuck up on me. My pulse would still spike when it happened though, pounding loudly in my ears as I carefully brushed the webs from my face. But then Robert Jr. took us down a second fork in the path when I distractedly collided with two webs of surprising density in a row. I finally focused on Robert Jr. ahead of me to complain about not warning me, and a tangle of silk lit up in my headlamp centimeters away just in time for my face to crash through it. Even though it was my fault for not watching where I was going, I said testily, "Come on, Mr. Lockhart, at least give me a heads up," as I dragged my gloved hands down my face, raking the web from my skin. Robert Jr. said nothing. I looked up, over his shoulder in front of me, and saw why. The trail ahead was entirely choked in web, a glistening haze like morning fog stretching farther ahead. Shapes twitched within it, different from the shifting masses of hundreds of smaller spiders in the first communal webs we saw. These were heavy and singular, with sharp angles plucking at individual lines of silk. I couldn't quite make sense of what I was seeing. Something crunched under my boot. I looked down at the wispy, stringy gray floor. Brittle old bones of some animal I couldn't identify lay there. Among the bones lay the aged, empty remains of a huge tarantula, skeleton and exoskeleton locked together in death. Had they fought and died tangled with one another? "Jesus," I said loudly, just as Robert Jr. breathed softly. "Jesus." He wasn't looking down, he was looking directly up. I looked up too, and froze. Our headlamps joined and lit up the webs that swallowed the understory, washing over the enormous spiders that moved within them. Things the size of fish bowls, with fat round abdomens and twitching, creeping legs thick as pool cues. Clusters of eyes reflected light back at us, and the movement of their heavy bodies made meaty, organic clicking noises. These things weren't what Robert Jr. had commented on the creature slowly descending from the web by a thread was. At first I thought it was a spider with a squirrel or a rat or something in its jaws, but a small logical corner of my mind reminded me that that's not how spiders eat, not even tarantulas who don't wrap their prey in silk. The rodent appeared bisected, as I couldn't see its back legs, with ugly gray skin visible around its midsection like it had mange. Its back half was, impossibly, the swollen bulb of a spider. It looked like some gruesome mockery of a centaur, the limp torso of some parasitic rodent bursting forth from an unwitting host. There was no way that thing could be real, or if it was, it couldn't be alive. But the thing's spinnerets kept pumping a hardy silk line, two spindly back legs touching at delicate tips as it worked its way down, and the rodent's head twitched, its furry front legs extending, paws grasping. I saw its face, a squirrel with too many beady black eyes extending up the front of its head, blinking gummily down at us. I could see its long yellow teeth as its mouth lolled open. I was distantly aware of my body moving, weakly grasping Robert Jr.'s jacket sleeve and yanking on it. His voice sounded very far away as he muttered, "What the fuck?" Movement in the corner of my eye somehow managed to pull my attention from the abomination above us. My eyes were drawn down to the edge of the trail on which we stood, and for a moment I thought the ground had dipped down an embankment and we were simply elevated on the path. But I soon saw that it was a massive hole in the ground, a burrow. I continued to tug mechanically on Robert Jr.'s arm. What the fuck? A face peered out of the burrow, ghostly pale against the darkness within, and seemed to drift up and out closer to us. It was a human face with too many eyes clustered across the bridge of its nose. Glittering black and blinking slowly, it ducked its head, long dark hair hanging in lank tangles, as a woman's bare moon-white torso emerged slowly from the hole in the ground. A hulking, hairy mass of a spider's abdomen the size of a Volkswagen Beetle followed, connected at her waist. Her 8-branched, thick legs crunched in the leaf litter, audibly thumping with the weight. Robert Jr. And I staggered backwards, upsetting more spiderwebs in the underbrush. The creature's legs were striped with white at their joints, and I thought of Lady Legs back at Robert Jr.'s house, and what he said about her species' size in the wild ungodly big. Robert Jr.'s thoughts were also back in his daughter's room, because as his hand gripped my arm in return, I heard him say, "Lucy." My eyes flew back to the creature's face, its unnatural addition of eyes surrounding the original's, and as it tilted its head, I recognized her too. Her mouth dropped open, lower lip dripping with something too viscous to be saliva, and her rail-thin arms spasmed once before lifting up, sending a painful jolt of electric fear up my spine. Her white, long-fingered hands took hold of the squirrel spider dangling between the two of us, and herself the thing squeaked and convulsed, its legs thrashing horribly, and Lucy brought it to her mouth. I ran. I thrashed my way blindly through web after web, back the way we came. I heard Robert Jr. call my name unexpectedly close behind me, and suddenly felt him crash into my back. I hit the ground hard, face first. I barely had time to register the bright starburst of pain as my nose broke and began to bleed, or the scattering of spiders millimeters in front of my eyes before Robert Jr. yanked me bodily back upright and whirled me around. I thought he was slapping me, but realized he was swiping away spiders that I'd picked up as passengers from the ground. "Don't you run off in here, boy," Robert Jr. hissed in my face, shaking me hard. "Something else will kill you before." The enormous creature loomed behind him, creeping down the trail after us. I started to yell, but Robert Jr. clapped his hand over my mouth, spinning to face her. He forced us into a sort of half-crouch, his body weighing me down to keep me from running again, and I stared with bulging eyes, struggling to breathe through my bleeding nose, as Lucy bore down upon us. "It's okay," Robert Jr. said, but he wasn't talking to me. I could feel him shaking against my back. "It's okay, Lucy, you're okay." She came closer, the precise movements of her vast spider body in stark contrast against the limp, feeble movements of her human torso. Her face seemed alert, even with the 6 bleary eyes that looked infected in their unnaturalness. But her arms hung listlessly at her sides, her posture hunched. Venom, blood, saliva flowed slowly down her chin, all that remained of the squirrel spider. I could hear her breathing, see her pale throat throb as she swallowed. "That's a good girl, baby," said Robert Jr., his voice low and soothing, despite his violent trembling. Daddy didn't know you lived here. Lucy, we didn't know we'd see you here. You did such a good job here all by yourself, didn't you, baby? Daddy's proud of you. He was slowly inching us back as he spoke nonsense to the thing in front of us. The spider shifted minutely, almost moving after us, but not quite. Lucy's dark, wet mouth drooped open. In a voice that sounded like wind in dead leaves, she hissed, "Daddy." Robert Jr. laughed, wild and terrified in my ear, pulling me another step back, the palm of his hand still crushing my lips against my chattering teeth. "That's right, baby, Daddy's here. Daddy didn't think he'd see you all grown up in these woods, huh, baby? Good girl, Lucy." She didn't move after us as we backed away, although her eyes followed us with laser focus. Again, her voice hoarse and vacant.
"Lucy."
"That's right, baby. Daddy's gonna take your friend back home, okay? You remember Aaron?" I groaned behind his hand, sick with fear, as all 8 of Lucy's eyes shifted onto me. She didn't say my name. Wildly in the back of my head, I wondered if she recognized any of the things Robert Jr. was saying to her, certain that she was all spider like this, that the 2 words she'd said were empty repetitions preceding her final attack. But still she stood motionless, watching our retreat. "Daddy's gonna take Aaron home. Is that okay, baby?" Robert Jr. said, "Will you let me do that, Lucy?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, "Okay. Good girl, Lucy. We're going away. Good girl." Another long stretch of silence as we moved steadily away from her. She still didn't follow, merely watching us. Her voice, unprompted this time, shook me to my core when it next creaked through the night.
"Come, see me."
The noise Robert Jr. made was something of a strangled sob and a laugh. "Yeah, baby, I'll come see you. I'll come see you again. Just let me take Aaron home and Daddy will come see you again, baby girl."
"Okay."
We were several meters away from her by now. I was sure we were nearing the bend and the fork in the trail we had taken. Slowly, Robert Jr. lowered his hand from my mouth, and I gulped a deep, shaking breath. "I can't get us out of here backwards," he said. "But I need you watching behind us. You hang on to me and I will walk you out. You tell me if she follows. Can you do that, son?" Wide-eyed and unable to look away from Lucy's figure down the trail, I nodded. "Yes. Yes, sir." "Okay. Careful. Now." His hand encircled my wrist tightly, and with a firm tug, he took us around the bend. I struggled to walk in reverse, my legs like rubber and my pulse roaring in my ears. Lucy didn't follow us once I lost sight of her. Robert Jr. navigated us back through the forest, avoiding all webs this time around. I don't know how long it took to get out of the woods. For all I knew, it took days. But eventually we broke through the tree line, and the unobstructed moonlight was blinding. I felt separate from my own body as I brushed harmless jumping spiders and orb weavers from my hat and jacket. Distantly, I heard Robert Jr. chuckling weakly. I turned around to look at Lockhart Wood almost casually. I leaned over and threw up on the grass. A few yards away, Robert Jr. did just the same, coughing and laughing harder when he was done. "Fuck!" he gasped, hands on his face. I watched him stagger and fall heavily onto his ass, giggling manically. Dazed, I went over to him and sat beside him on the grass, staring at the forest. I spat remnants of bile on the ground between my knees. I fumbled with my headlamp, turned it off, and threw my hat aside. I peered at Robert Jr.'s tear-streaked, laughing face, vaguely concerned. I can't tell if that's good laughter or bad laughter. Christ. "Mate," he gasped, possibly hyperventilating. "Damn, you and me both. Fuck." He pressed 2 fingers to his neck, checking his own pulse. "What are you going to do now?" I asked weakly. "Shit, Scooter, I don't know. Probably visit my daughter every now and then, damn." He scrubbed his hands over his face, groaning deeply. My head swam. I flopped backwards, staring at the night sky. The stars looked like little white spiderlings. I thought suddenly of my mother back at the house, and for whatever reason, all I could think to say was, "Hey, so I was thinking, you should give my mom a call sometime. She's not seeing anyone." I don't remember getting home that night. I don't remember getting settled on campus the next day. But I think I'm going to change my major to biology. I'd like to see Lucy again, and I think maybe a study in arachnology might be a good place to start.